Ladies and gentlemen, today we step into the charged theater of two rare personalities. The narcissist, hungry for validation, immune to criticism, and the super empath, gifted with deep emotional radar, fierce integrity, and an almost surgical insight into human motive. When these two meet, something curious happens. The super empath does not snap the whip or raise a fist. Instead, they shine an unflinching spotlight on the narcissist's carefully curated illusion. Their torture is simply this: ruthless authenticity. Picture the narcissist's world as a hall of mirrors, every reflection warped to flatter. The super empath walks in carrying clear glass. They listen without adoration, question without fear, validate themselves instead of the narcissist. Their calm presence unthreats the facade. Where the narcissist demands praise, the super empath offers silence. Where the narcissist spins fantasy, the super empath responds with concrete facts. This done participation in the narcissist game delivers the most exquisite pain possible to an ego that survives on external applause. The foundation of the super empath's quiet power lies in their ability to validate themselves from within. Unlike the narcissist, whose self-worth is built on a fragile tower of external approval, the super empath does not rely on others to define their value. They are deeply in tune with their emotional compass, able to sit with their feelings without needing others to affirm or explain them. This internal stability is like a locked vault the narcissist cannot penetrate. The narcissist's usual tools, flattery, gaslighting, triangulation, fail to take hold because the super empath sees them for what they are and refuses to be seduced by the illusion. A compliment may be acknowledged, but not absorbed as truth. A criticism may be heard, but not believed if it doesn't align with their reality. This unshakable self-awareness unnerves the narcissist. It blocks the narcissist's attempt to play the hero or victim, because the super empath does not need saving and will not be made to feel guilty for standing tall. Their sense of self is not up for negotiation. Even when the narcissist tries to create emotional chaos, accusing, projecting, demeaning, the super empath holds to their center. They observe the behavior like a scientist watching a lab experiment, not like a puppet reacting to strings. This refusal to emotionally collapse or over-identify with the narcissist's projections causes deep frustration. The narcissist expects compliance, insecurity, or at least a reaction, but all they get is calm certainty, that internal validation, the knowledge that I am enough, I am whole, I see clearly, becomes an invisible force field. It denies the narcissist the fuel they crave and turns the empath into a mirror, reflecting only truth, not flattery. In a world where the narcissist needs mirrors that lie, a mirror that reflects truth is not only unbearable, it is, to them, a form of psychological torture. When confronted with manipulation, emotional outbursts, or passive-aggressive tactics, the super empath's most disarming weapon is often their silence. Not a cold, punishing silence, but a deeply grounded, emotionally intelligent non-reactivity. This kind of response, or rather non-response, confuses and unsettles the narcissist. They are used to triggering chaos and commanding attention. Their strategy depends on stirring emotional reactions: anger, tears, panic, or desperate pleas for understanding. But when those tactics fall flat, when the super empath instead offers a calm stare, a neutral tone, or even just a pause before responding, the narcissist loses control over the dynamic. This silence is not submission, it is sovereignty. It communicates without words that the super empath is not afraid. They are not emotionally entangled. They are not available for the game. Even when the narcissist provokes with calculated cruelty, using personal attacks, gaslighting, or even love bombing, the super empath listens without absorbing. Their face may stay composed, their tone may remain measured, and their body language may even suggest detachment. But beneath that surface lies enormous strength. They have trained themselves to observe rather than react, to pause rather than lash out, and to stay rooted in their own truth rather than be pulled into emotional confusion. To a narcissist who thrives on reactions as proof of control, this silence is maddening. It denies them what they crave most: emotional dominance. They thaw out bait, accusations, emotional blackmail, martyrdom, and the super empath simply does not bite. The narcissist escalates, but the empath refuses to rise. The narcissist twists the story, but the empath stays grounded in facts. This emotional stillness throws the narcissist into a spiral because it reveals their impotence in the face of self-mastery. In relationships where the narcissist once dictated the mood, the energy, and the narrative, the super empath's silent composure reclaims the power. It forces the narcissist to face something they dread, that their control is slipping, that their theatrics are no longer effective. One of the most powerful elements in a super empath's response to a narcissist is their ability to enforce firm, consistent boundaries. Boundaries that are not up for debate, manipulation, or emotional blackmail. These are not loud ultimatums or dramatic declarations. They are quiet, resolute lines drawn from a deep understanding of one's self-worth and emotional health. Boundaries are where the super empath says, "This is what I will accept and this is what I won't." Not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. And for the narcissist, who views others as extensions of their ego, these boundaries feel like rejection, even punishment. The narcissist expects access, unfiltered, unrestricted access to a person's time, energy, emotions, and thoughts. In their worldview, boundaries are obstacles to be broken, tested, or bypassed. They may respond to limits with guilt-tripping. "I thought you cared about me," anger, "you're abandoning me," or passive resistance, "I didn't know it was that serious." But the super empath does not waver. They hold the boundary calmly, without justifying, defending, or explaining excessively. They don't collapse under pressure or fold when the narcissist starts to sulk or rage. They remain firm because they understand that boundaries are not weapons, they are shields. This consistency is what deeply unsettles the narcissist. They are used to people bending, adjusting, and compromising to maintain harmony, especially with someone who dominates emotionally. But the super empath is different. They no longer prioritize the narcissist's comfort over their own well-being. They say no without guilt. They disconnect when conversations become toxic, and they protect their emotional space like sacred ground. They don't give in to the narcissist's need for 24/7 validation, and they won't be manipulated into betraying their values just to keep the peace. What's most threatening to the narcissist is that the super empath doesn't do this with malice. There's no aggression, no cruelty, no revenge, just quiet, steady refusal to be consumed. This calm enforcement of boundaries sends a loud message: you do not own me. And for the narcissist who thrives on psychological ownership, this is intolerable. The very existence of the empath's boundaries forces the narcissist to confront their lack of power and influence. Where others may fold to avoid conflict or fall into the trap of self-doubt, the super empath stands tall. Their boundaries are built not from bitterness, but from clarity. They have learned, often through pain, that self-protection is not selfishness. And every time they say no, every time they walk away from manipulation, every time they honor their own limits, they are showing the narcissist something deeply disturbing, a person who cannot be broken, reshaped, or controlled. A narcissist's power depends heavily on creating and sustaining illusions about themselves, about others, and about reality itself. They weave stories of superiority, victimhood, or endless competence, all designed to maintain control and inflate their fragile ego. But when a super empath enters the equation, one of the most disarming and painful experiences for the narcissist is being consistently fact-checked in real time. The super empath does not challenge with hostility or confrontation. Instead, they calmly and confidently ask for clarity, evidence, or truth when something seems exaggerated or false, and this gentle pursuit of accuracy is more destructive to the narcissist than outright attack. The narcissist is used to getting away with half-truths and manipulations. They speak in hyperbole, twist timelines, exaggerate accomplishments, and conveniently forget past actions to control the narrative. Most people either go along with it to keep the peace, or are too unsure of themselves to call it out. But the super empath, grounded in truth and perceptive of patterns, sees through these inconsistencies. When the narcissist boasts about something improbable, the empath may simply ask, "When did that happen?" Or "Can you show me where you got that from?" These innocent questions, devoid of accusation, destabilize the narcissist's constructed identity. What makes this particularly torturous for the narcissist is that it's not an emotional argument, it's logical. It's not a shouting match they can twist or dominate, it's a clear, rational request for truth. And because the narcissist often operates in emotional and psychological distortion, they find themselves exposed under this scrutiny. The more the empath calmly asks questions and checks for facts, the more the narcissist is cornered by their own contradiction. They might try to gaslight the empath, deny things they've previously said, or become defensive and hostile, but the empath won't be pulled into the drama. They won't argue over reality. They will simply stay consistent, composed, and clear. This pattern of calmly bringing facts to light begins to dismantle the narcissist's facade piece by piece. It becomes harder for them to control the story, harder to convince others of their persona, and harder to convince themselves. Their manipulation thrives in environments of confusion and emotional chaos, but the super empath brings order, memory, detail, and emotional intelligence to the table. The empath remembers what was said before, notices the inconsistencies, and refuses to forget or excuse harmful behavior. They don't need to scream, accuse, or humiliate. They simply don't let the narcissist rewrite the truth. This relentless confrontation with reality, disguised as a simple quest for honesty, is something the narcissist cannot tolerate. It threatens their sense of control and exposes the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are. And when that illusion begins to shatter, the narcissist is left vulnerable, frustrated, and often enraged. To them, being seen clearly is not enlightening, it's unbearable. One of the most unique traits of the super empaths is their ability to practice selective empathy. Unlike general empaths who may absorb and respond to all emotional signals indiscriminately, the super empath has evolved through experience, often painful experience, to discern who genuinely deserves their emotional energy and who is attempting to exploit it. This distinction is crucial when dealing with narcissists who frequently weaponize sympathy and compassion as tools of control. The narcissist plays the victim, exaggerates wounds, or manufactures crises to elicit emotional responses and manipulate outcomes. But when these tactics are used on a super empath, the result is often the opposite of what the narcissist expects. A super empath feels deeply, but they also observe closely. They've learned to detect emotional incongruence, when words and energy don't align, when tears lack authenticity, or when apologies are laced with hidden motives. While others may rush in to comfort or rescue, the super empath pauses and assesses. And that pause, that emotional discernment, becomes a barrier the narcissist cannot easily cross. It protects the empath from being pulled into a cycle of enabling or rescuing that only reinforces the narcissist's sense of entitlement. What makes this dynamic even more unbearable for the narcissist is the empath's refusal to play the savior. Narcissists often count on the emotional sensitivity of others to keep them centered in every conversation, conflict, or crisis. They expect others to put their needs first, soothe their egos, and overlook their faults in the name of compassion. But the super empath's selective empathy says, "I see you, but I won't rescue you from yourself." This shift in emotional engagement hits the narcissist where it hurts most: their assumed entitlement to others' energy. Rather than offering unearned sympathy, the super empath may offer a measured response: acknowledgement without immersion, understanding without surrender, and presence without emotional entanglement. If the narcissist cries manipulation or accuses the empath of being cold or selfish, the super empath stays rooted, They understand that real empathy does not mean sacrificing your well-being to comfort someone else's ego. It means having the wisdom to choose who truly deserves emotional connection. The narcissist, who is accustomed to using guilt and pity as forms of control, finds themselves emotionally starving in the presence of selective empathy. They realize they cannot easily trigger the super empath's guilt reflex or lure them into cycles of toxic caretaking. The empath sees the pattern, remembers the manipulation, and withdraws the emotional fuel. And for a narcissist who feeds on attention, emotional indulgence and drama, that withdrawal feels like suffocation. This form of emotional intelligence, empathy with boundaries, compassion with awareness, is what separates the super empath from others. It disarms the narcissist, not through cruelty, but through clarity. It's the empath saying, I care, but not at the cost of myself. And in the narcissist world, where everyone is expected to orbit around them, that kind of self-honoring empathy feels like rejection, like betrayal, like the deepest kind of emotional torture. One of the most profound ways a super empath dismantles the narcissist control is through transparent, direct communication. While the narcissist thrives in environments filled with ambiguity, double meanings, emotional manipulation, and misdirection, the super empath brings a different energy to the table. One that is rooted in honesty, clarity, and unwavering emotional transparency. This style of communication does not give the narcissist the wiggle room they crave. It closes loopholes, shuts down gaslighting, and leaves no space for misinterpretation. Every word the super empath speaks is grounded in their truth, and it forces the narcissist to confront something they try desperately to avoid: accountability. When the narcissist tries to manipulate through wordplay, saying things they can later deny, shifting meanings mid-conversation, or speaking in ways that leave others confused and uncertain, the super empath responds with calm, unmistakable clarity. They do not speak to impress, confuse, or overpower. They speak to be understood. They say exactly what they mean and mean exactly what they say. This precision strips away the narcissist's usual ability to twist dialogue in their favor. They cannot accuse the empath of misunderstanding, because the empath communicates too clearly to be misread. They cannot play dumb or pretend something wasn't said, because the empath leaves a clear trail of truth wherever they go. This level of communication is deeply unsettling for the narcissist, who relies on emotional fog to maintain power. In the presence of someone who communicates with both emotional maturity and intellectual clarity, the narcissist finds themselves exposed. Their passive-aggressive remarks fall flat. Their deflections are met with steady eye contact and unwavering facts. Their baiting fails to provoke a chaotic reaction because the super empath doesn't take the bait. They simply name what's happening with unflinching honesty. The super empath's communication style is not loud or aggressive, but it is deeply confronting. They might say things like, "That's not how I experienced it," or "Let's stick to the facts," or "I'm not available for this kind of conversation." These statements aren't rude, they're boundaries spoken out loud. And because they are delivered without emotional volatility, the narcissist cannot label the empath as too sensitive, irrational, or overreacting. Common accusations used to undermine others. Instead, they are faced with someone whose clarity of speech mirrors their clarity of thought, and that forces the narcissist to realize they are no longer in control of the narrative. Furthermore, the super empath doesn't play games. They don't use guilt, manipulation, or silence as weapons. They bring issues into the open, discuss them plainly, and expect the same in return. This expectation of emotional honesty creates a pressure the narcissist cannot withstand. The narcissist is used to manipulating people through ambiguity and suggestion, but none of that works on someone who insists on speaking the truth, hearing the truth, and living the truth. In this way, the super empath's communication becomes a mirror that reflects the narcissist's dishonesty back to them, quietly, consistently, and unavoidably. It leaves the narcissist feeling boxed in, exposed, and powerless, not because they've been shouted down, but because they've been understood too clearly. Another powerful way a super empath disrupts and emotionally disarms a narcissist is through the unapologetic reclaiming of their identity. Over time, narcissists attempt to erode their victim's sense of self by chipping away at their confidence, redefining their beliefs, mocking their interests, and subtly reshaping who they are to better serve the narcissist's needs. This manipulation is gradual and often cloaked in false concern or distorted affection. I just want what's best for you. You're too sensitive for that. Or, that's not really you. But the super empath, especially after awakening to the truth of the dynamic, begins a quiet, revolutionary journey back to themselves. A journey that becomes a source of immense discomfort for the narcissist. The reclaiming of identity is not loud or theatrical, it's in the little things. The empath begins to dress how they want again, pursue interests they were once discouraged from, spend time with people the narcissists disapprove of, and most importantly, speak and act in alignment with their authentic self. They stop second-guessing their every word and choice. They begin to trust their own intuition again, despite the narcissist's years of invalidation. They may return to writing, painting, singing, traveling, meditating, whatever made them feel alive before they were made to feel too much, too weird, or too emotional. And each act of authenticity sends a clear message: I am not yours to mold. This re-emergence of self terrifies the narcissist. They see the empath glowing with renewed confidence, standing taller, laughing freely, and no longer seeking their approval. This freedom represents a loss of power, a collapse of the narcissist's carefully constructed hierarchy, where they stood above, critiquing and controlling. They try to regain dominance by reminding the empath of past mistakes, minimizing their progress, or planting seeds of self-doubt. But the super empath has outgrown their influence. They recognize these tactics not as truth, but as fear-based attempts to regain control. Even more devastating to the narcissist is when the super empath begins speaking their truth to others, not out of revenge, but from a place of healing. They may begin to share their story, set the record straight, or explain the truth behind the smiling facade the narcissist carefully curated. For someone who thrives on maintaining an image and manipulating how others see them, this is a nightmare. The empath isn't just reclaiming their inner world, they are also reclaiming their voice in the outer one. And that voice is powerful. It holds clarity, compassion, and credibility. The narcissist may try to discredit the empath, call them unstable, or frame them as vengeful, but it rarely works. Why? Because the empath isn't shouting, they're simply standing in their truth. Their voice doesn't tremble with rage, it resonates with self-awareness and lived wisdom, and people can feel that. The narcissist's lies and smears begin to fall flat against the solid ground of the empath's authentic return. Ultimately, the empath's act of becoming themselves again is the greatest rebellion against narcissistic control. It cannot be manipulated, bargained with, or undone. Every step they take toward their true self is a step away from the narcissist's influence. And for someone who sought to possess, reshape, and dominate, that kind of freedom is intolerable. It's not just the empath escaping, it's the empath rising, and doing so in full view. One of the most agonizing experiences for a narcissist is realizing that the super empath is no longer emotionally accessible, not in the way they once were. Narcissists are emotionally parasitic by nature. They don't just crave attention, they need emotional energy to maintain their false sense of self. In relationships, they feed off of reactions: joy, anger, sadness, affection, pain, because it reinforces their importance. For a long time, the super empath likely supplied that energy freely, offering understanding, connection, forgiveness, and deep emotional investment, believing love could heal the cracks in the narcissist's mask. But once the super empath wakes up to the manipulation, betrayal, and cyclical emotional abuse, they begin to close the gates of emotional access. And for the narcissist, this is nothing short of emotional starvation. At first, the shift is subtle. The empath doesn't react as intensely to the narcissist's provocations. Their smiles become more reserved. Their eyes no longer light up at the narcissist's praise or approval. Conversations become surface level, and emotional intimacy, once used as a weapon by the narcissist, is withdrawn. The narcissist might try harder, ramping up charm, guilt, or outrage to reignite that emotional exchange. But the empath remains detached, not out of cruelty, but from a place of self-preservation. The empath begins to value peace over performance, solitude over validation, and inner truth over external approval. The narcissist becomes painfully aware that their access to the empath's emotional world has been revoked. The warm, responsive, nurturing energy they once exploited has now been turned inward, used by the empath to heal, grow, and reconnect with themselves. And this withdrawal creates a vacuum that the narcissist cannot tolerate. Suddenly, they are faced with the horrifying reality that they are no longer the center of the empath's emotional universe. They are no longer needed, no longer special. And most unbearable of all, no longer able to elicit a reaction. This emotional detachment is devastating not just because it disrupts the narcissist's control, but because it strips them of their identity. Narcissists construct their false self through the eyes of others. Without the empath's mirroring, their exaggerated sense of self-worth starts to crumble. They begin to feel irrelevant, unseen, and powerless. The empath's silence becomes louder than any words could be. Their calm becomes a storm the narcissist cannot weather. Their lack of reaction becomes a mirror, showing the narcissist exactly how little power they now hold. Even when the narcissist tries to stage emotional crises or love bomb their way back into the empath's heart, they are met with quiet strength instead of vulnerability. The empath may offer polite concern, but nothing more. Their emotional responses are now intentional, not automatic. Their heart is no longer open for manipulation, no longer vulnerable to false apologies or hollow promises. The narcissist who once fed off that deep emotional bond finds themselves locked out of a space they once believed they controlled. In essence, the super empath's emotional detachment is a form of liberation, a declaration that their feelings, energy, and spirit are no longer on the narcissist leash. And for the narcissist, this is psychological torment. They are left grappling with a reality they spent years trying to avoid. They never owned the empath, never truly controlled them, and without access to their emotional world, they are nothing more than noise echoing into silence. Perhaps one of the most profound and soul-shaking ways a super empath tortures a narcissist is by thriving without them. Narcissists need to feel like the center of someone's world. They need to believe that without them, the person they manipulated would fall apart, remain broken, or at least stay emotionally tethered. The idea that someone they try to control can actually grow stronger, happier, and more fulfilled after cutting ties is unbearable to them. It's a direct assault on their carefully constructed illusion of superiority. But when a super empath begins to rise, to glow, to live fully after walking away from the narcissist, it sends a shock wave that penetrates even the narcissist's hardened emotional shell. This thriving doesn't happen overnight. The empath lightly endured emotional wounds so deep they questioned their worth, sanity, and even identity. The narcissist may have convinced them that no one else would ever love them, that they were too emotional, too difficult, or not enough, without the narcissist's validation. But the empath, unlike the narcissist, grows from pain. They alchemize suffering into strength. They begin to invest in themselves, perhaps for the first time in years, learning, healing, connecting with new people, and rediscovering passions that were buried under years of emotional manipulation. And slowly but surely, the empath stops merely surviving, they start to thrive. This transformation is not just external. It's visible in their energy, their boundaries, their laughter, their newfound calm. They no longer flinch at reminders of the past. They stop waiting for closure or apologies. They embody peace, joy, and purpose. They no longer speak with fear, but with clarity and grace. The narcissist may hear about this growth through mutual acquaintances, social media, or direct observation, and the realization cuts deeply. For someone who believes they are the best thing that ever happened to another person, watching that person flourish without them is enraging and humiliating. Thriving is the empath's most powerful statement. Not one shouted with vengeance, but one lived in freedom. It dismantles the narcissist ego because it contradicts everything they told themselves and others. The narcissist expected the empath to be bitter, broken, or obsessed with revenge. But instead, the empath becomes someone entirely self-fulfilled, unreachable, untouchable, and uninterested. The narcissist's attempts to re-enter their life fall flat. Because the empath doesn't need anything from them. Not their approval, not their recognition, not even their apology. And perhaps the cruelest twist for the narcissist is that they often attempt to win back the super empath once they witness this glow up. They send messages, play on old memories, or pretend to have changed, but the empath sees through it all. They don't respond, or if they do, it's with calm detachment and polite indifference. There's no longing left, no anger, no pain, just clarity, and that clarity, witnessed in someone they try to diminish, is like a mirror the narcissist cannot bear to look into. It reflects not only their failure to break the empath, but also the emptiness of their own existence. This is where the true torture lies, not in revenge, rage, or retaliation, but in peace. The super empath, through healing and self-reclamation, becomes a walking reminder of everything the narcissist will never have. Authentic joy, depth, emotional freedom, and real love. And for a narcissist who feeds on dependence and illusion, that kind of reality is not just painful, it's devastating. One of the final and most silently devastating ways a super empath dismantles a narcissist is by becoming completely unbothered. There is a quiet power in indifference that narcissists cannot comprehend or tolerate. Unlike anger, sadness, or confrontation, emotions that still indicate a form of engagement, indifference signals total detachment. It says, you no longer matter here. For someone whose entire identity depends on extracting emotional reactions, attention, or control from others, the super empath's emotional neutrality is the deepest form of rejection. It denies the narcissist what they crave most: relevance. This shift into indifference is not something the empath performs, it is something they become. It is born through the fire of betrayal, the cycles of abuse, the realizations that broke their heart but rebuilt their soul. The empath no longer checks on the narcissist. They don't wonder what they are doing, who they are with, or how they feel. There is no bitterness, only silence. The narcissist, who once occupied the empath's thoughts constantly, now barely registers. The empath doesn't need to block them to prove anything. They simply don't engage. The narcissist is no longer part of their emotional world. And what makes this so painful for the narcissist is that it flips the script completely. The person they once made feel invisible now sees right through them. The one who once clung to their every word now listens to none. The empath doesn't argue anymore, not because they've given up, but because they know their energy is sacred. They've withdrawn it entirely, without drama or announcement. That absence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. The narcissist may try to provoke them through triangulation, social media posts, flying monkeys, or sudden contact. But nothing works. The empath doesn't flinch. They don't rise to defend themselves or take the bait. They no longer feel the urge to explain their side, correct the narrative, or earn validation. Their peace has become more valuable than being understood. That stillness, that refusal to dance in the narcissist drama, is what tortures the narcissist most. It's not the empath screaming, "I hate you." It's them saying nothing at all. To the narcissist, this indifference feels like erasure, like being dead to someone who once gave them everything. And in the narcissist mind, being forgotten is worse than being hated, because hate is still a connection. But indifference, that means the narcissist no longer has access, not to the heart, not to the mind, not even to the memory of the empath in the way they once did. This emotional finality is the ultimate form of empowerment for the super empath. It's not an act of cruelty. It's the natural outcome of deep healing. The empath doesn't wish harm, doesn't harbor resentment. They simply move on, fully, authentically. And that movement forward done in peace and silence is like a locked door in the narcissist's face. A door they can knock on forever, but one that will never open again. And so, in the end, the greatest power of the super empath lies not in revenge or retaliation, but in their ability to heal, rise, and walk away with grace. What once felt like a deep wound becomes a source of wisdom. What was once manipulation is now a memory stripped of power. The narcissist who thrived on control is left behind, disarmed, forgotten, and irrelevant, not because the empath wanted to cause pain, but because they finally chose themselves. The super empath doesn't destroy the narcissist with hate. They dismantle the illusion with truth, resilience, and emotional freedom. Their silence speaks louder than arguments. Their peace disrupts the chaos, and their growth becomes a living reminder that the narcissist never truly broke them. And that is the most powerful closure of all.